next couple of segments, we're going to talk to our good friend. He was a member of Congress for a couple of terms in the great state of Pennsylvania, great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now a candidate for U.S. Senate against Pat Toomey. Run, Joe, run should be the talk of Pennsylvania these days, and it should be win, Joe, win at the end. And, of course, we're talking about a good friend, a great friend of the program, and a great patriot, our friend, Congressman Joe Sestak joins us. How you doing, Congressman?
I'm doing well, Jeff. Great to be with you.
Great to be with you. We got much to talk about, a number of different fronts. Obviously, we're heading into this 4th of July weekend, and, there's a lot of talk about a possible terrorism strike, and we're getting everybody concerned, and there's a issue this morning in the Navy Yard. I agree, and of course I adhere to the government, trying to do the right thing to protect its citizens. But I wonder, Congressman, if we give in to the terrorists by scaring our constituents here. We went through this after 9/11, red alert, orange alert, and you understand this because you served. That there is obviously understanding that everyone should be vigilant, understood. But there's a little bit of, I think, overkill sometimes. How do you look at this and balance it moving forward?
Yeah, that's a tough question there, because if something does happen, there's not a soul in America that won't say, did we do enough to overkill, to make sure that we aren't protected here at home? But on the other hand, every additional resource that you put into the fight of terror that may prove not to be necessary is something you take away from our own national security of development, economic development here at home. Look, here's what I believe. This is going to be, and I've always believed this, a long fight. It is one that is not going to be won at the very end by the United States military. We will quarantine it. We will contain it with Homeland Defense assets also. But eventually, to win this, it is about the hearts and the minds. And that's the issue of where we have to make sure that the strategic thrust of our resources are placed appropriately in Africa, the Middle East, Southwest Asia particularly, into the development of those types of nations, to where the literacy rate of women isn't like 2%, where it becomes 50, 60, 70% and grows, and all of a sudden there's a chance for them to have livelihoods that absolutely have them aspire not to a radical type of belief, but rather one where they understand the beauty of religion, Islam well included, but where it is one where they then aspire to doing that, where they pursue peaceful livelihoods. That's the real challenge.
No doubt. I think that we can come to a compromise on this. I was speaking with a couple of other colleagues, Lawrence Korb at the Center for American Progress, and asked him the question about, how the president should deal with this issue of ISIS and terrorism in terms of talking to the American public and sort of kind of calm down, because I think there are unfortunately people on the Republican side and some Democrats, but mainly this is a Republican tactic, who are going to call Obama weak, who are going to basically say, ISIS is coming down your chimney next door, they're coming tomorrow. It's this sort of memories of, I was very, very young, and you were a couple of years older, but the Russians are coming kind of thing. And I think that we can't afford, politically, because of the fact that we have so much needs in this country, to rebuild the infrastructure, to rebuild the education and healthcare systems in this country, that you can't put all this money in this fear. So I want to get your thoughts here about what the president should say, what the next president should say, about how to deal with this. We shouldn't be in this kind of mode of, oh, my God, what's coming through that next door kind of thing. At least that's my view. Your thoughts?
No, you're right. What we need from the leadership of both Republicans and Democrats is to recognize that global disorder is so true a part of the environment around this globe of ours that we are in for what General Dempsey, the Chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, said the other day, into a perpetual engagement out there. Because it's not just terrorism, but the Defense Department recognizes that climate change will lead to probably some of the more pertinent conflicts, crises around the world as droughts heighten some of the disorder in the world and crises prevail. This is really one where the dynamics after the Cold War are no longer one of state against state. This is one of non-state actors, terrorists, droughts that lead to types of deprivations that lead to conflicts and crises. So how you best deal with them is not just with the United States military. They're not leaving the marketplace in Iraq, as some used to say during the Iraqi war, and they'll be in our marketplace here the next day. That's not it. This is where the character of the world is changing, which disrupts our peace and our prosperity. In order to best address it, the president needs to lay it within the theme of this is the global disorder that has been brought about because these states broke apart after the Cold War. And now what we need to do is recognize that all the elements of our power, from our military, yes, but from our economy, our diplomacy, from our ideals, needs to be engaged in the world properly and out there with allies and friends working it for the hearts and the minds, not just against the terrorists in order to take them down. And at home, above all else, national security begins here by proper investment in the education, the health that gives us the type of economy that permits us to have the assets for livelihoods here at home that grow and grow, but also to have the resources to continue to engage abroad so we can protect ourselves by bringing about a peaceful order to this world in conjunction with allies and friends.
Talking with that great friend, Congressman Joe Sestak, here on the Jeff Santos Show. As I said at the top, he is running as a candidate for U.S. Senate. Now, when you look at this race with Senator Toomey, this is a guy who, tries to mark fear and concern about what is going to happen to Pennsylvania and, the liberal Democrats and their all this sort of, again, fear tactics. And yet, what has he done for the average American, average Pennsylvanian? Not much. And this is the Republican Party, and it's personified, I think, in Senator Toomey. You have looked at his record, and one of the reasons why you decided to run against him. And I think he is an example of the Republicans in general and why the Democrats have to take back the House and Senate, because we are heading into a place of no return if the Republicans can continue to hold power. Your view?
Yes, let me just give a few examples. He has sent us to war with his vote as a congressman to Iraq, and yet he's voted as a congressman, as a senator, until this past December against every veterans appropriations bill that's come before him. He has said we need a better infrastructure and transportation system, and yet he led the filibuster against the long-term transportation bill and told the Tea Party group, I told you that we kill it, and we did. He has filibustered the Paycheck Fairness Act for women so they get equal pay as men 7 times. He has said, when asked whether he thought there should be any minimum wage, he avoided the question but said we should not raise it. He has voted to dismantle the Affordable Care Act over 30 times and has co-sponsored an amendment where Operation Choke Point, set up by the Justice Department, that goes after banks that let those payday lenders and other scammers call old people at home and say, give me your credit card. He actually has voted to shut down Operation Choke Point, which has saved our seniors millions of dollars and had it returned to them from banks. In short, Senator Toomey, we tell one good story in Pennsylvania that he cares. But on the other hand, Senator Toomey has done damage to us here at home and abroad when he wrote a letter to Ayatollah, the senior Ayatollah, of Iran and said, ignore our president. What he's doing to try to bring back a peaceful resolution with Iran so it doesn't have a nuclear weapon, ignore him. We're Congress. We're the Senate. And we're not going to abide by it. I think
it's outrageous. But that's who Senator Toomey is. That's why you need to elect Joe Sestak. We're right back with Congressman Joe Sestak after this time out. It's the Jeff Santos Show. We're talking with our good friend, Congressman Joe Sestak, candidate for U.S. Senate in the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and Senator Toomey. And, of course, you can go to joesestak.com and not only donate but volunteer if you have some friends in the Pennsylvania area. Congressman, on this show, we have been talking a lot about populist progressive issues. And one candidate that has dominated the discussion on those issues, not only in the last month or so, but over the years, is a guy named Senator Bernie Sanders, and has done very well. He raised $13 million in the last quarter. He did, 10,000 people yesterday in Madison, Wisconsin. And a lot of people say, oh, it's revolutionary what he's talking about. I think it's less revolutionary in terms of the policies because I've seen them done. It's not like these are reinventing the wheel. I mean, we've had 4 years of free school in California in the 1960s and early 70s under Governor Pat Brown, Jerry's father. You know, we've had single-payer health care work just to the north of us in Canada. I don't see anybody from Calgary or Vancouver saying, oh, I got to get out of here. So these things, which are basic fundamental pieces to the American future, I think should be talked about by other Democratic candidates, from yourself to other Democrats. We've had some great progressives on, Rosa DeLauro, Barbara Lee, and others. And I think they're all supporters of Bernie. And I'm thinking, well, if you support Bernie and you support some of these basic ideas, then let's go for it, because we can't be Republican-like. We're never going to beat the Republicans on their issues. So the Americans want our issues, all the popularity. So what do you say about that? Because I think that's an important part of how we move this country forward.
I think the value that you're hearing on the campaign trail by Senator Sanders is the following. It's a recognition that our government has two roles to play. One is to make sure it doesn't unduly interfere at all with our individual freedoms, like freedom of the speech and press. Or I couldn't be on a radio show with you right now saying what I believe.
Right.
But at the same time, our government can actually advance our individual freedoms by protecting people, not just from the abuse of government, which I just mentioned, but from the abuse of private power, particularly corporate power. Therefore, government has a role held accountable to ensure that we, the people, are protected from environmental degradation from corporations that would not, unless the right rules were there and enforced, take care of putting the waste in proper disposal areas. Take derivatives. Wall Street, the day that the market crashed 800 points as the effort to try to bail out Washington failed initially, there was $700 trillion of derivatives of notional value. Not one was on a marketplace where you could say who owned it or who didn't own it. You could trade it in the back room of a ham and cheese shop if you wanted to, or take the money that unduly influences Washington, D.C. from corporate power because Citizens United has permitted that. Those are the types of words you're hearing from Senator Sanders to say, wait a moment, government shouldn't unduly interfere with our freedoms, but it also can advance our freedoms in the areas protecting us from undue private power.
I mean, I just think that if you, again, look at this, these have been tried and true measures in most first world countries, most of Western Europe, Australia, Canada. Secondly, we've tried them in the case of education right here in California. And I just think that, and we had, stricter measures. We had Glass-Steagall before the 90s. We had stricter balances between insurance companies and banks and so forth. So all of these things are returning to, in some cases, a better yesterday or a better tomorrow that we've seen in other parts of the world. And I don't understand why Democrats can't get behind this message, because otherwise we're forced to say, well, we agree with our colleagues from Wyoming and Idaho and, South Carolina, but we want to twist it a little bit. And that's what ends up happening.
Jeff, you have an excellent point. Look, I tell people the very first act of Congress in about 1791, when it was up to New York City, before it transferred itself via Philadelphia to Washington, D.C., was to pass Obamacare. People look at me and I said, no, really? It mandated health care for all merchantmen, because we didn't want our merchant fleet, which is going to be the backbone of our new maritime economy, to have scurvy ruining the sailors' health, and therefore we couldn't move on. And yet today, the Affordable Care Act, if it wasn't for that, we'd lose $100 billion a year because of the under and uninsured. It's just a practical thing. You may call it progressive, I call it practical. And government merely made that happen in both 1791 as well as today. But take education. In Philadelphia, the first public school in this state was founded. And you know what the governor wrote at the time? He basically said, look, everyone will attend. The poor shall attend for free, while the rich will pay a reasonable fee, so everyone can then contribute to the common weal. Our government, so to speak, of old days, like it should today, advances the individual's freedoms and our nation's health, security, and educational prowess by enabling us to have an educational system that is available to all. That's the basic root of our two great tenets: rugged individualism aligned with the common effort, the common good, the common weal.
Well said, Congressman, and one of the reasons why we need to get you elected to the Senate. But I just hope that people, there are too many folks. We saw this in 2014, Congressman. I almost called him Senator, which will be the case soon. The 2014 class of Democratic senators ran away from Obamacare. They ran away from the increase in minimum wage. Senator Pryor in Arkansas, let me be absent that day. And then he gets defeated, and Arkansas passes the minimum wage increase. It's stuff like this that drives me crazy as a progressive talk host advocating for Democrats when people run away from things that are very popular with the rest of the nation.
I am dying to just be back out there on the Affordable Care Act. I love those town halls with the Tea Party. Shook their hands before they came in, listened to them, let them yell at me, but just answered the question. And today, the answers are readily available. Think about it. We have cut the growth of health care in half over the last 4 or 5 years in America, from 6% a year to 3% a year. You know what? If 7 out of 10 people had switched their health care plans on the individualized exchange that the Obamacare set up, if 7 out of 10 had switched them, they would have each saved, on average, $1,800 a year.
There you go.
Because so many
Congressman,
insurance companies...
You got to run, sir, but
down.
thank you so very much.
And thank you for having me.
Anytime. Right back with your calls.